You know, they said this would never happen. So, you know, if they didn't know, now they know.
Working class and young voters led Brandon Johnson to a huge victory in Chicago last night to become the next mayor of the city. And this was a stunning victory for a number of reasons. So I'm going to get into his speech. I'm going to show you the results. I'm going to get into an appearance on CNN that he made this morning with the framing of CNN's questions. They're just amazing as always. So I'll get to that. But Johnson did a very good job in that interview as well. So I'm going to show you all of this. This is really one of the rare, clear victories for the working class, especially in a major city like this. You normally don't get a candidate like Brandon Johnson running for mayor in a place like Chicago. But this was a major victory for a number of reasons. I'll get to that shortly. First, before I get to anything, I do want to say that I am going to cover the results of the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin as well. That is a whole other amazing story. So I was going to fold that into this video. You see the tab up here, but I'm going to make it its own separate video. If you are not subscribed, make sure you hit subscribe right here. And when you do that, you can go down and hit the all bell notification icon to be notified of all the videos that go up. So you'll be notified when that next video goes up. And this helps the algorithm, helps me. It also helps you. You get to see these videos before anyone else does. These notifications go up before the video even shows up on the public page. So you get to see these videos first. But let me get to this race, this amazing result. So Brandon Johnson elected mayor of Chicago. Result came in at 10:51 p.m. Eastern last night. These are the results here. Johnson at 51.42 to Paul Vallas at 48.58. So Johnson is a county commissioner, a former public school teacher, a former school teacher organizer, and endorsed, of course, by the Chicago Teachers Union, as well as Bernie Sanders. Paul Vallas, on the other hand, complete opposite. So he's a former Chicago schools executive who ran a tough on crime message and was endorsed by the police union. So there is a larger message in this race for the Democratic Party as a whole. And I'm going to get to more clarity on that in a bit. But they're both Democrats. Paul Vallas, though, a much more conservative Democrat, and also has a history of just being on the right. So the Democratic, label doesn't really fit Vallas, though you could argue a lot of Democrats do share his perspective when it comes to how to address crime, even though what they try and present has not actually led to any results. But I'll get to more on that. So just a great image here of Brandon Johnson holding Bernie's new book. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. Again, Johnson really is a rare case in that he's someone who's actually of the working class, an actual union organizer, winning a major mayoral race for a massive city like Chicago. It's hard to really communicate how big of a victory this is. So I am really looking forward to seeing what Johnson can do as a mayor. But the money race, of course, was also weighted to one side. So Vallas raised more than $19 million, about $8 million more than Johnson has raised, and outspent Johnson by a nearly 2-to-1 margin on television ads. Johnson's campaign had said in recent weeks that it was planning to go on the offensive with heavier spending in the closing days of the race, though Vallas has clearly had an advantage throughout the cycle. So the money advantage on Vallas' side, of course, Vallas being backed by the establishment, had a lot of support from corporations, as well as, of course, I said the police union, more conservative leaning folks that are wealthier. So this was a race that was weighted against Johnson. And despite that, the working class and the youth turnout led him to victory. So on the youth turnout point, Amy Kin here with this. There's been a jump in young voter turnout from the February election to the runoff as the preliminary turnout data from 7 p.m. tonight. So a 32% jump, 5K more ballots cast from the 18 to 24 age range, and 24% jump, 17,000 more ballots from the 25 to 34 age range. Young people, when they have someone that excites them, they come out to vote. This is one of the lessons coming out from this race. You have someone in Johnson who actually spoke to the needs of working class people, including young voters, of course, and that encouraged a lot of these people to come out and vote in this race. Where normally, if you had two just basic Democrats, two corporate Democrats running in this race, I don't think you would have seen this kind of turnout. But because Johnson is an exciting candidate, you had people come out. Now let's get to some clips from this speech. So I will link to the full speech below the video. It's about 17 minutes long here, but I clipped this up to some great moments that he delivered last night.
Now, you've heard me say this before, Chicago. Well, you're going to keep hearing it because the heart of this movement has always been about investing in people. But I know what it's like to come home and your water is not on. I know what it's like to come home and thank God for a long orange extension cord from your window to your neighbor's window. But I also know what it's like to teach in Cabrini Green, where my students can see one of the wealthiest neighborhoods from their back window, but out of their front windows, bulldozers stare them down, preparing to destroy their public housing. I know what I'm talking about when people rely upon public transportation, and because it is not reliable, people have lost their jobs because of an unreliable, unsafe transportation system. So when I talk about investing in people, I know what I'm talking about. For too many people in the city of Chicago, we recognize value, but for too many of us, we don't believe that we deserve it. That changes under a Johnson administration. It was right here in the city of Chicago that Martin Luther King Jr. organized for justice, dreaming that one day that the civil rights movement and the labor rights movement will come together. Well, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement and the labor rights movement has finally collided. We are experiencing the very dream of the greatest man who ever walked the earth. So I believe since we are taking steps to figure it out here, let's take this bold, progressive movement around these United States of America. Today, the dream is alive. And so today, we celebrate the revival and the resurrection of the city of Chicago. It is time for Chicago to come alive. Come alive, Chicago. My name is Brandon Johnson, and I can't wait to be sworn in as the next mayor of the greatest city in the world.
Fantastic speech, amazing energy, great message. This combining of the labor movement with the civil rights movement, this is how Democrats can win all across the country. This is what you have to do. And the reason why they have not done that is largely because of the moneyed interests that have funded many of these Democratic campaigns. Corporations, the wealthy, funding those campaigns, putting all this money into these races to eliminate people like Brandon Johnson. Yet still, despite all that, despite being down in money, he came and won in this race, delivering a message of hope, a working class message, a message of being together with unions, pushing labor rights, civil rights. This is a fantastic candidate, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in Chicago. But this is how the media has tried to go after him, and you're going to see when I get to the CNN clip as well. This is what they always do. Oh, you're on the left? You support Defund the Police, which is very scary because all this crime is happening, and you want to defund the police, which, if not enough policing was the problem, then why isn't the current situation better? Like if that really is the issue, a lack of funding for police, then why has all the funding been put into police over the past decades and that not solved the problem? It's because a lack of policing isn't the issue here. The issue is a lack of funding into these communities. So one example of how the media tried to frame this whole debate is here from Axios from March 17th. Defund the Police dogs Chicago mayoral candidate Brandon Johnson. Yet this is what he supports here. Johnson, who pushed to divert funds from police to social services in 2020, a very obvious thing that I've discussed many times on this channel. told Axios at our Mayoral forum last month that he hasn't changed his position on police funding. He also told Block Club this week that his vision for public safety doesn't include defunding the police. Quote, but what I am committed to is doing is to make sure that we are actually investing in a smart way, he said, adding that we are asking too much of law enforcement. Also a point that I have made on this channel. This is a good way to frame this issue. If you think the quote or the slogan defund the police is too scary, and maybe for some people it is, all this is about diverting money from police to social services, because the current structure, the current framing, the focus of putting all the money into policing clearly hasn't worked. How about investing into people that have been divested from their entire lives? So in July 2020, Johnson introduced a non-binding resolution on the Cook County Board promising to steer funds from police to social services. So the media takes this and turns into, oh, he wants to defund the police. Oh, crime's going to get so much worse. Because policing has helped up to this point? Come on. But you see more of that here on CNN. So check out this interview with Don Lemon. This is after his victory, discussing his approach to crime.
If we want to prevent crime, we have to hire young people and invest in them. There's a direct correlation between youth employment and violence reduction. There's a direct correlation between investing in mental health care related services, mental health professionals, and violence reduction. There's a direct correlation between affordable housing and good paying jobs. I mean, these are the dynamics that ultimately prevent crime. And if you are a mother or a father or aunt or a sibling, you would much rather have had the opportunity to prevent violence from happening than having, provided the closure to solving the violence, right? So that's what this is really about. It's a real testament to what is possible, not just for the city of Chicago, but quite frankly, those of us who believe in a more holistic approach around the country.
But you're going to need resources to do that. And some folks believe that you're going to need more than what you promised, 200 new detectives. Is that enough? Will other officers be hired here?
Well, again, it's a comprehensive approach. If we are just simply looking at putting more money into policing, that has demonstrated to be a strategy that is certainly short-sighted. The unique opportunity that we have in this moment is to pay attention to the results that just happened here in Chicago. I was very clear about what's necessary. I've said this the last time we were on together. I am arguably the first mayor to wake up in the city of Chicago who lives in one of the most violent neighborhoods in the entire city. And so what I want for my family, which is a better, stronger, safer community, I want that for every single family across the city of Chicago. And what Chicagoans said overwhelmingly is that we have to get at the root causes of crime.
Was Don Lemon even listening to the first answer? Brandon Johnson goes on to discuss how it's important to invest into these communities, invest into these young people, give them opportunities. And then Don Lemon's like, well, to do that, you have to hire more cops. What? What are you talking about? He just talked about what the actual solution to the problem is, and you go back to needing to hire more cops. This is the entire framing from the mainstream press on this issue. Now, of course, look, there are some in the press, like Mehdi Hassan on MSNBC, who do good work, but by and large, what Don Lemon's doing here is what they all do. This framing of, oh, crime is so bad, you got to put more money into policing. If you look at the budgets of these cities, so much of their money goes into policing. How can you continue trying to bring a hammer to this issue and keep hitting your finger and think you got to bring a bigger hammer? Like, it doesn't, there's obviously needs to be a different approach here. And Brandon Johnson, I think, clearly offers that different approach, even if people like Don Lemon apparently have their ears plugged while he's giving it. So last thing here, this is just on overall view on this race. This is from Vox. And again, this is what we're going to continue to see across the U.S. in many of these races when it comes between two Democrats. So there was a big ideological divide in the race that mirrors national struggles within the Democratic Party across the country. The party establishment, including a current U.S. senator and a former governor and statewide leaders, rallied around Vallas, the former Chicago schools chief, and he was boosted by business leaders and the largest city police union. Progressives coalesced behind Johnson, who had the support of national and local activist organizations, organized labor, and more specifically, the powerful Chicago Teachers Union. This is going to continue to be the fight. They're going to have business leaders, and in some cases, when there's no conservative or Republican option available, police unions, you're going to have that on one side. So billionaires, business leaders, more conservatives like police unions versus labor organizers, civil rights movement, the youth vote, unions. So this is going to be the ongoing fight between these two sides. And in most cases, more of the money is going to be on the side of those that are with business leaders for obvious reasons. So this is why people power is incredibly important. It's why a real message is incredibly important. So, apart from, this case was two Democrats facing each other, but when you have a Democrat and a Republican, having a Republican light on the Democratic side, someone who is also tough on crime and who is standing up for business leaders, why would people vote for that individual? The Democrat or the Republican light version of a Republican. Why would they vote for that person over the actual Republican? You have to bring people that don't normally vote out to vote. That's what Brandon Johnson did by speaking to labor rights, speaking to unions, speaking to the youth. That is how Democrats can win. And to be fair, I mean, this has been obvious for a while. This has been very clear even to people in the Democratic Party in high positions. But they keep fighting back against it because their interests, their financial interests, lie in siding with business leaders as opposed to siding with the working class. I think in many cases, these Democratic leaders, these people, whether they're consultants or whatnot, they rather lose to a Republican than lose to a progressive. Because as long as they lose to a Republican, they still got a job. If they lose to a progressive, they're out. Brandon Johnson here showing what needs to be done, what the party needs to do, and leading by example in a major city like Chicago.